few months ago, I read a story by the writer Paul Klingsnorth, and he writes, as a teenager in England during the 1980s, he went with friends into old churches, and in the old churches would have guest books in their foyers, just to say, who was there, write the name of the people and addresses. And he would go into these old churches that he was fascinated by, but he was a teenager, and so he wrote in them with his friends, "Satan, Prince of Darkness, I will destroy you and all of your works. Ha ha ha, die Nazarene." And that's something that he would do and get a chuckle out of with his friends. And of course, it was kind of a teenage rebellion. It wasn't, he didn't destroy anything in the church. He didn't take anything. He just wrote in the guest book that he was Satan, and that he was not a Christian. He was proclaiming his atheist belief. And later, Paul Klingsnorth became a writer. He became a leader in the environmentalist movement, and he became an activist. And he was also an atheist, but he also saw a need for some spirituality, and he just said, well, I can't do Christianity. I've already written that off. That's not the answer. So he enthusiastically started practicing Wicca and Buddhism, and he even became a Wiccan priest and leader of his coven in Ireland, where he moved to in the time. But over time of these practices and activism, Klingsnorth became dissatisfied. He was very much into all the different Buddhist practices. He did everything there was to be done in witchcraft, but they seemed less real to him, less connected from what he thought was the truth that he needed. And so he kept, in the midst of this, he kept running into Christians in the weirdest places. And he kept having dreams that spoke to him in a weird way. And he just said, okay, I'll read the Bible again. I'll see what's in it again. And he started reading the Bible, and it was coming alive. And he went with a friend, and he actually started going to a Romanian Orthodox church in Ireland, of all places, and with just a handful of people, mostly old people, and he found that the story was coming alive to him. He found a resonance between the Christian understanding of creation and his value for the earth. And he describes, eventually, he just broke down. He could not deny it anymore, and he became a Christian as a truth that he would surrender to. And he wrote about his conversion and his story in this essay in First Things magazine in June 2021, and recommend it to any of you who are interested on his journey. And he continues to write, has a Substack, but this truth that Klingsnorth surrendered to is what we're looking at this morning. This truth of creation in Genesis, culminating in the gospel of Jesus Christ in the New Testament. It's a story that displaced everything else and that animates Paul's life today. And it's a life that can animate our life. It can give new life to that which was dead. That's what we thought we wrote it off before. And now we can read it with fresh eyes. So we're in Genesis 1, as was read for us, how God created the heavens and the earth. We previously went over days 1 through 4. We kind of did the overview the first time. And now we're at verse 20, which is at day 5, where we see God creating the living creatures, not just the things in the sky, but the living creatures for the waters below and the birds in the skies above. So let's read it again. You have your Bibles open. It says, in verse 20, God said, "Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, Let the birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God said it was good, and he blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, fill the waters and the seas, let the birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning, the fifth day. Now, what's your attitude when you read this? The seas and the skies swarming and teeming, and the creeping things that creep. What's your attitude? Is it exciting for you? Or is it kind of disgusting? Swarming, it's like a horror movie, The Birds, right? Hitchcock, or other things you could imagine. Just all this life out of nothing, just coming out of nowhere. Do you have the urge to spray with Lysol or cover with bleach? Like, where are these birds and all these creatures? I don't even know. What's it all about? Well, you know that people say cleanliness is godliness? It's not in the Bible. It's not in the Bible. In order to embrace God's creation, some of us have to deal with our gag reflex. Because God calls this good. He calls this life good. Yes, even swarms and creeping things is good. And like Peter in Acts 11, some of us need to hear God's word again. And how he says, don't call anything unclean that I've made clean, that I made good, that I designed. Because our fear or discomfort doesn't make something bad. It's what God says. This is good. This is beautiful. So you have great sea creatures, things that creep, everywhere multiplying, filling the earth. And now it says, verse 21, God said it was good, and he blessed them, and he commanded them to multiply. You ever seen children at the aquarium? It's a wonderful thing. You go to the aquarium, they have these tanks where you can touch the rays in them and different fish and things, and encourage the kids to touch the fish. Many of the grown-ups don't do it. It's kind of slimy things. I've already done that, Or you go fishing with your son and feel how these scales are rough. And another one's kind of this other kind of fish is slimy. It doesn't have rough, and you go into the dirt with the worms and all these different things that creep around. This is good. This is part of what God made us for, is to acknowledge the goodness of, yes, all God's creatures. Jesus said God's eye is on what? The sparrow. A little sparrow. Even little pigeons that do on your sidewalk, right? God's eye is on all those things. He values them. He sees them. And so the things that may seem unseemly, God delights in. And he values. They're beautiful to God. Moving forward, verse 24. God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God said, and it was so. He spoke, and his word created, and it was good. All things that were made, including the stinky, creepy things, yes, the reptiles, every kind of living thing, snakes even, all good. Things that we might think are ugly. We're like, what's that for? A platypus? What's going on? It was good. It was made according to God's design. It was beautiful and right. And that's how the sixth day began. But God wasn't done, right? Verse 26, and God said, what? Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock and all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. So this is the last of this pattern of God speaking and creating. God created man in his own image. And he's very repetitive. He wants us to know this. God made man in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Just so you know, this is an exclamation point. And the word that God uses to create mankind is bara. It's a Hebrew word. There's different words to create. Different words. Bara is special in that it's the only word applied only to God himself. There are words for creation that are applied to craftsmen who make things out of wood or iron or whatever. But bara is only used of God. And it's always to say, made from nothing. The one original thing. Bara is barad, so to speak, by God. So Genesis 1:1, it said, in the beginning God barad the heavens and the earth. He created the heavens and the earth. And then Genesis 1:21, God barad the great sea creatures and every living creature that moved. That's where we first have living animal life, day 5. And then Genesis 1:27, bara is used 3 times to emphasize this. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he barad them. Male and female, he barad them, created them. So barad, it's not just fashioning something. It's out of nothing, God created something. Life from non-life. And God created people as unique image bearers of God. That's what it's saying. Even unique from the rest of creation. Elsewhere, God says, let there be lights in the heavens and all these things. But God uses this word bara, create from nothing, especially the human beings. It's creation with an exclamation point. And after that, it says creation isn't just good. Very good is the word. Very good. Exceedingly good or beautiful. You could even translate it. And why very good? Why is God's creation of mankind uniquely good? Because of his image, his likeness. Nothing else was created this way. This word for image, I'm giving you a Hebrew lesson more than normal, but these are important words. The word for image is selam in the Hebrew. And it's a word that, yes, says image of something, a visual representation. But it's also used later in the Old Testament to describe idols. An image set up that represents a false god for worship. So a sculpture or a picture that was seen as a portal to something else. That meant something else. It wasn't just a hunk of wood or a stone. It was meant to portray, this is meaningful. And so it says God created mankind in his image. It could reflect something physical about God, that God somehow looks like us. But even more than that, that we mean something that has there's a symbolic significance to men and women creating God's image. It says something about who God is. Historians tell us that ancient kings, they would set up this selam, their image, in far-flung parts of their kingdom as statues. Why do they do that? Why do you think a king would do that? They say, yeah, this is, I own this. This city out there is just as part of my kingdom as my own palace. And so they would make an idealized version of themselves, a king with a scepter, on a throne, or perhaps on a horse, with a spear, representing themselves. This king rules here. And there were symbolic representations that meant something, that you had to comply with that reality. And frequently the kings of that time believed they were the image of the God who was worshipped. So Pharaoh was the son of the god Ra. He symbolized the sun god, so to speak. So when the image of the king was put on someone, it meant they had authority. They were able to rule. So when it says God made all of us in his image, what does that mean for us? We don't just represent ourselves, but we represent God himself, male and female. And we also represent his rule, his authority. We are God's advertisement. This is God's place when we live appropriately according to him. We represent, and this is for all people, not just people with so-called royal blood, or who are those who are heroes in war. All of us, male and female, show something unique about God's essence and beauty, regardless of our social status, regardless of what school we went to, or what our parents did, or if they were addicted to crack, whatever race or gender, we all reflect God's ways that no other creature can, regardless of disability, regardless of defect. All of us reflect who God is. And God calls us very good, very beautiful. That's how he sees us. And our existence is very good. Human existence is very good. Nothing was very good up until that point. And then God says, I made man and woman in my image. Very good. Beautiful. And then it says that what comes after that, verse 28, and God blessed them. And he said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves over the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit, and you shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and every bird of the heavens, and everything that creeps in the earth, and everything that has breath of life, I've given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold means pay attention, look, it was very good. And there was evening and morning the sixth day. So just as God blessed the fish and the birds to be fruitful, to multiply, God says, mankind, you are made in my image, and you are to be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it, and rule over it as my regent, my representative. And I will give you every plant for food, and it was very good. And then Genesis 2, really, the first verses kind of belong with the first chapter, where it says, thus the heavens and the earth are finished, all the host of them. And the seventh day God finished his work that he had done. He rested in the seventh day, or Sabbathed, or Shabbated on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. So God completed his work of creation, and Sabbath rested on the seventh day. God did not rest because he was tired. Oh, that's it. I'm going to just put up my feet on the easy chair and just, take a nap. No. God rested to do what? Show his secure position, seated, enthroned over all that he made, as the one who is ruler, as the one who takes joy in everything. So verse 3 says, God blessed the seventh day, made it holy, because on it God rested, or Shabbated, from his work as he'd done in creation. Exodus 20 is the big 10, right? What does it say? God blessed the seventh day, set it apart, so that we can have a pattern for life, for our own life. Because it says, remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. 6 days you should labor, do all your work, but the seventh day is a Shabbat to the Lord your God. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So we have, we're Christians. The first Christians, we understood the Sabbath pattern, remained in effect, but was reapplied to the first day of the week when Jesus rose from the dead and made the first day of the week holy. He set that apart. No other day of the week did that happen. The first day of the week, symbolizing a new creation. Death has been defeated. A new day of rest. And that's the pattern that we live out as Christians. That showing the same lesson that was shown on that day of creation. That our lives, yes, have work, but work does not define who we are. We are not defined by our work, by what we do, by how useful we are. We are defined by our Creator God. We are defined by stopping, resting, so that we can worship and behold the goodness of our God. And know who we belong to, know who we are, know where we came from and where we're going. Remember when this was first recorded? Who recorded Genesis? Moses. What were the circumstances of that? Yeah, they were slaves in Egypt. They had to work 7 days a week. Moses says, remember, that's not how it was set up by God. He made us to Shabbat so we would rest and worship God 1 day a week. So we know who we are. We're not slaves. That's the old Israelites, the old Hebrews. We are made in God's image to know Him, to represent Him. So God says that's who we are. Productive work is necessary, but it's not who we are. God made everything, gave everything life, not so that we would be more efficient in our work, right? That the stock market Dow Jones would go up. That's not our purpose, but that we would know Him. We would know life and what it's about. We'd be in right relationship with our Creator and mankind and all of creation as His representatives. Our constant temptation is for us to overthrow this command, this Shabbat, the God-given limits God gives us to our work. Our constant temptation is to revert to slavery 24/7, to always be productive, to always be needed, to have a need to be needed, or to put others in bondage to our desires. You have to work for me. I have this scheme. We have to do this, and we will remake our world. God's creation wasn't good enough. We need to remake our world in our own image, according to our own desires, according to our own purposes, and we need to force people into our schemes, just like Pharaoh in Egypt. And that's what Paul Klingsnorth noted in his essay. As he was converting from the things of this world, New Age and Wicca, he said, our problem, as hard as I tried to be an environmentalist and to make things better on Earth, climate change and everything with government, as hard as we tried, we were going backwards because we are in rebellion against our Creator. We are in rebellion against our limitations that God gives us to say, stop. That's the word Shabbat. It's great in Hebrew. It's like Shabbat, stop, cease. Look at God. You are not a slave. You are not a machine. And you are not to put that on other people because you are made in God's image. You are created. You are not creator. And so Klingsnorth noted that the environmental activism that he did only made everything worse because it was in rebellion to God and made a greater machine of, instead of following the beauty of creation and its wonder, but trying to engineer and rework everything else. And he said, I had to choose between the cross of Christ and the machine of this world. And Klingsnorth said he needed to choose creation and life. And he needed to choose the cross, which ironically led to resurrection life. Denying himself, acknowledging his limits, and saying, yes, our need for control, reason, and science, they have their place. But when we exclude who we are, created in God's image, when we exclude beauty and wonder of a child exploring what God has given to us freely without our working for it, when we exclude that part of ourselves, we become just cogs in a machine. We become more anxious and depressed, and we pull more people into the machine. We're convinced our ideas are better, and we double down, and we try and fuse ourselves to our technology. We try and merge ourselves with the algorithms of Silicon Valley to do away with our imperfections, our backwardness. You see, it's logical, you know. Everything is working this way. Join the machine. But instead of life, we end up with death. Our rejection of limits in our Creator squelch and kill others. And we become more miserable than an overtired toddler. Not getting our way, cynical, jaded, burnt out, embittered, because our quest for control to make everything a machine leaves us alone in a cold universe, estranged from our God, estranged from one another. So why are we so prone to anxiety and depression? Why are we so attached to the machines that can bind us? We forget who we belong to. Shabbat. Stop, that's like a conductor, you know. God conducted, you know, is a whole chorus of creation. Shabbat. Worship your God. Your life is not all about work. Yes, work is necessary. But remember your God. Remember who you are. Remember your story, the story that you left behind, that you discounted. You said, oh, that's useless. It's not relevant to today's world. We're going forward with our machine. But God is clear. We are made to know our Creator. And no, we're not God. That God made us from nothing so that we would be able to rest and worship in Him. Knowing the one who is utterly beyond us. That there's a human life in existence that's not tragic, it's beautiful and good. Every human life is a beautiful reflection of who He is. Every human life is not to be rejected or counted as icky, no matter who they are or what they've done. Every human life is meant to show the one who gives us our life with abundance, giving us everything we need. All of our quests to re-engineer our own lives according to our desires achieve nothing. What we need most is to do what? Cease, Shabbat, our striving, and fall down before our Maker and Savior. That's where we find our life. That's where we find our peace. That's where we find our rest. Going to do our prayer.